Buenas noches y si alguna persona necesita traductor para español, por favor tenemos el traductor aquí o me pueden avisar para darles los audífonos.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. It's wonderful to see a packed house as we explore sustainability and what that means for our great city of Denver. My name is Brenna Simmons-St. Ange, and I'm the Executive Director of the Alliance Center. And it's my honor to welcome you here this evening and to help set the stage for the very important conversations that we're about to have. And I have to share a human moment I had yesterday as I was preparing my remarks for tonight. I was listening to NPR, and it was the top of the hour, and as you know, the news headlines are just spewing a litany of things that I should be concerned about, things I am concerned about. And one of the headlines touched very briefly on this new collective understanding that we have less than 10 years to truly combat climate change before the effects become irreversible. And while I fully appreciate the weight of what that means, I was filled with this overwhelming sense of hope. And that's where this human moment came in for me, because all of a sudden I had this internal dialogue that started conflicting and challenging my hope. And what I came back to yesterday, and what I continue to come back to, is that leadership at the local level is where action must be right now. And that is the demonstration of what you're seeing tonight. It's leaders like you and me and the mayoral candidates up here who are dedicating their time to having a conversation around sustainability. It's the work I get to do every day, the inspirational team I lead, and the powerful tenant organizations that come here every day to work collectively to make Colorado truly equitable, inclusive, and sustainable. And we actually define that as one where our communities are thriving, our democracy is strong, our economy works for everyone, and our planet is healthy. Now, you might be saying to yourself or the person next to you, Brenna, that's all good, but how do you actually work towards that future? Well, we work towards that future by demonstrating, sharing, and scaling tangible solutions for the high-performance building through our very own living lab that you're sitting in right now. We work towards our mission by accelerating the collective impact of the sustainability community, starting right here with our 50-plus mission-aligned tenant organizations and expanding out to leverage cross-sector collaboration, creating healthy social, political, and environmental systems in which Coloradans can thrive. We provide tools, resources, and knowledge to drive equitable climate action at the individual, organizational, municipal, and state level. Now, key to all of our work is collaboration, and tonight is a perfect example of that, as we have joined forces with 3 of our tenants, Progress Now, Sierra Club, and Conservation Colorado, as well as an equally amazing yet not tenant organization, 350 Colorado. And we have come together to explore a central force for sustainability in our state. Yes, I said our state. Because the mayor of Denver not only sets the tone for our great city, but for our entire state. Denver is widely seen as a key lever in change, driving our economy, our politics, and our population growth. And Colorado is seen as a leader in sustainability across the country. And while we've done a great deal on this front, it's simply not enough. We can and we must do more. And that is what tonight is about. How do we up our sustainability game, so to speak, starting with the Denver mayoral race? I hope you know this, but the mayoral election is on May 7th, and I hope and trust each and every one of you will cast your ballot. Our goal tonight is to leave with a constituency informed of the commitment to sustainability and climate change from your next mayor of Denver. and for our mayoral candidates to fully understand and appreciate the importance of sustainability to your constituents. I want to take just one moment to point out that we define and approach sustainability through a full spectrum lens, and that's how the conversation is going to be generated tonight, looking at the intersection of healthy communities, healthy economies, and healthy environments. Before I pass the show over to our moderator for this evening, I want to take just a moment to thank our partners, our funders, our tenants, the very talented Alliance board and staff, the media who have joined us here tonight. Thank you to Ian, our moderator, and a big thank you to each and every one of our mayoral candidates. It is your passion, dedication, and leadership to public service that is truly inspirational. Here tonight to moderate our forum is Ian Silveri. He's the Executive Director of Progress Now and a Denver Post columnist. Without further ado, I give you Ian Silveri.
Thanks, Brenna. Let's give Brenna a hand, yeah? Good evening. Welcome to the Alliance Center's 2019 Mayoral Forum on Sustainability right here at the Alliance Center. We're grateful to have a room full of passionate Denverites ready to hear from 4 of our candidates for mayor, one of whom will be the next mayor of Denver in all likelihood. I'm Ian Silveri. I'm the Executive Director of Progress Now Colorado, an organization that was founded right here in the Alliance Center about 15 years ago. I was supposed to have a co-moderator tonight, my good friend, Senator Julie Gonzalez. And let's face it, she's a total badass. She won a huge, crazy primary in Denver, the most competitive race in the city last year. And she's gone to the Capitol to work on huge, tough issues like parole and prison reform, rent control, and repealing the death penalty, just to name a few. Unfortunately, she can't be here tonight because the Senate is facing unprecedented obstruction by those who are upset that they are no longer in power. So your state senators are still on the floor right now. But that's all right, because while we're sad she won't be here with us, we know she's fighting for all of Denver on the floor of the Senate right now. So let's give her a hand anyway so she can hear us from 200 East Colfax. There won't be any intro statements, but every candidate will have a closing statement. I'll briefly introduce each of the candidates. We're going to jump right into it. Immediately to my left is Dr. Lisa Calderon. Senator Penfield Tate. Jamie Giellis. And Mayor Michael B. Hancock. The first segment will be a lightning round where it will take about 40 minutes total, and each candidate will have a 45-second answer to the same question until we either run out of time or run out of questions. Our timekeeper up here will hold up a yellow card when you have 15 seconds left and a red card when that time is up. I will be cutting you off. So please, please, please keep your answers to 45 seconds because we have a lot to cover tonight, and the people of Denver want to know what y'all think. You ready? Let's do this thing, yeah? All right, let's get started. To limit global warming to 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius, the level scientists say is necessary to avoid the most catastrophic impacts of climate change, we must reduce CO2 emissions by at least 2% of baseline emissions per year to achieve a 70 to 90% reduction by 2050. I swear to God, this isn't a math problem. Denver released its climate action plan in 2018 that outlines an 80% reduction by 2050. Here's the question. Science now tells us that we can't wait until 2050 to meet these goals. How will you accelerate these goals to achieve them in 12 years, which is what scientists tell us we must do? What specific steps will you take in your first year of office? Dr. Calderon.
First of all, I would have an aggressive plan because we're in climate crisis, not climate change. And that includes doing things much differently, including not accepting money from the oil and gas industry and standing up to them. Centering the experiences of those who are most vulnerable, including marginalized communities, communities of color, who actually have the least amount of resources to move away from harm. And actually having a sustainability plan. The Denverite plan currently only mentions sustainability a couple of times. So I would prioritize that across all of our city agencies.
Thank you, Dr. Calderon. Senator Tate.
A couple of specific things. Since we're talking about emissions, we need to come up with more effective and efficient ways to move people around this city, to get them out of single occupancy vehicle trips. That's one start. Secondly, we need to work cooperatively with the state and federal government. Governor Polis has created a situation where we have a broader array of non-combustion engine vehicles. We need to look at citywide tax credits or incentives, and we need to be very aggressive about creating more charging stations in the city, because part of the difficulty is if you want to use a different sort of vehicle, you may have some limitations on where and how you can charge.
Thank you very much. Ms. Giellis.
Two primary areas of focus: transportation and how we build and develop. So after declining slightly in 2008 during the Great Recession, emissions from transportation have been on the rise since 2009. We have only seen a 1% increase in transportation use by commuters since RTD Fast Tracks was passed. We need a localized transit system. We need to get cars off the roads. We need to prioritize bikes and pedestrians as well. Second is building. A third of our emissions issues are coming from our buildings. We need to convert to solar and geothermal. The city can lead in that, and then we need to find incentives for how we use both our municipal building code and work with current building owners to convert our buildings to that type of use.
Thank you. Mayor Hancock.
Denver currently has the plan to reduce emissions. So it's about expanding our Energized Denver program. We had a over 90% participation rate. We need to accelerate having more involved in terms of our commercial buildings, as well as accelerate their benchmarking and, of course, their energy efficiency. Expand our electric vehicles and expand the number of electric vehicle charging stations. We're already well on our way to meeting our goal of having 200 electric vehicles in our fleet. And as equipment or technology becomes available, we want to expand it on our larger fleets and, of course, our patrol vehicles going forward. And of course, incentivizing the purchase of solar and installation of solar gardens. We can do that with our sales tax rebate. We're looking at that right now, and we're looking at other incentives, particularly around affordable housing and new builds in our planning department.
Thanks very much. Let's give them a hand for question one. Many of you spoke of transportation. That's going to be the core of the next question here. We'll start this one with Senator Tate. Investment in an efficient, affordable transportation system is vital to combating climate change and ensuring our ending, our dependence on fossil fuels. In Colorado, transportation is the second largest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. With leadership, Denver can build a transportation system that relies on efficient vehicles and a smart infrastructure that emphasizes clean, convenient, and affordable transportation choices that also decrease traffic congestion. As mayor, how will you create multimodal transportation systems that support infrastructure for non-motorized transit, public transportation, and zero emissions vehicles in a way that is affordable for individuals at all income levels?
I will begin by creating a Department of Transportation that will focus on this area exclusively to elevate this to cabinet level concern. Secondly, I think it's important that we leverage the opportunities we have with a number of organizations who are already working in this field to expand the use of bike lanes, to expand the use of alternative technologies in terms of transportation and moving around the city. We will do that. I already talked about including the use of charging stations, but we need to go further. We need to look at using vans or some sort of shuttle systems within neighborhoods and between neighborhoods to try to incentivize people to get out of cars for very short trips that happen on a daily basis. We need to look at incentivizing carpools through our employer network in the city as well.
Thank you. Ms. Giellis.
We do need to elevate transportation to a cabinet level department and form a Department of Transportation that can oversee localized transit. I've focused my campaign on evaluating the return of a streetcar network to Denver. Ultimately, it's going to take multi-modes to complete the network, but it has to be one of the first things a new mayor does. We don't have time to keep planning. We have to start implementing. We also need to look at how to share our streets with a complete bike network and ped network that protects pedestrian safety. Currently, while Go Bond has funded quite a bit of bike and ped infrastructure, we're looking at it implementation over 10 years. We don't have time to wait. We need to complete the network now and add as we go.
Thank you very much. Mayor Hancock.
The Department of Transportation Infrastructure has already been announced and will be implemented this year. We'll go to the voters in November to officially change the charter, but we have completed this entanglement of public works. We've segregated and isolated the transportation resources and programs, and so we are deploying it already, functioning pretty much and we will make it official this November with the voters' approval. The second thing is, of course, we've expedited our 125 miles of bike lanes. We plan to do it over 5 years, but we're actually expediting that plan under the leadership of Giellis. And we're also completing our sidewalk network, which is a major part of our Elevate Denver bond program going forward. And so now you have your bike, you got your sidewalks for pedestrians, and we're also rolling out the bus rapid transit along major corridors starting with Colfax.
Thank you, Mayor Hancock. Dr. Calderon.
So a lot of talk about planning and what folks are going to do in the future, but I also want to focus on what our issues are now. I want to give a shout out to Kaylin Heffernan, also a mayoral candidate who's outside. So some of those are the voices that you're hearing. And part of that is a concern around just a lack of accessibility today, not into the future. So when we look at our lack of network, we can't just focus on the city core, which is often what we're doing here in terms of the city's planning. We are forgetting about those other neighborhoods in the outlying areas that don't have the same level of accessibility and yet have higher rates of deaths because our streets are unsafe. So it's wonderful to plan into the future. We need to do that, but we also take care of the urgency of now.
Thank you very much. Let's give him a hand for round two. This is going really fast, getting a lot of information. Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Ms. Jamie Giellis. Gentrification and rapidly increasing housing prices are forcing Denver residents out of their longtime neighborhoods. Due to this, many neighborhoods feel that the city has neglected them in favor of development. What specific actions will you take to make Denver an affordable place to live and ensure that all residents are able to also benefit from its growth?
Thank you. Gentrification begins with how we look at planning and zoning, and it's part of the reason I've called for a pause to the Denverite plan. Denverite is opening up our city to growth, to density, and to development across the city. And it will hit the areas most challenged, the neighborhoods that already struggle the most with development first, forcing that gentrification cycle to continue. So zoning and planning can protect these neighborhoods. The way we do that, the way we look at neighborhood development and growth in terms of, do neighborhoods have access to transit, to affordable housing, to parks, to services, and how can the city intervene to protect people where they are and keep them in place through investments in their homes and being able to afford upkeep and taxes on their homes.
Thank you. Mayor Hancock.
Within a year after taking her dead now, Jamie, turn me off. After a year of taking office, we did an assessment, an actual study in Denver to understand where gentrification was occurring, displacement. This followed the Great Recession, the foreclosure crisis that hit Denver. We identified those neighborhoods and immediately started doing fairs. Those started in the late 2012, which ultimately ended up becoming our Neighborhood Stabilization Equity Task Force, which is now deployed to vulnerable neighborhoods and they have the full breadth of every agency to deploy resources to protect and to blunt the impacts of major public and private investments. So NEST is a first step. $300 million in Affordable Housing Fund, $60 million will be spent this year by the city of Denver to build affordable housing. $50 million was spent last year. And so that is important, as well as our temporary rental utility assistance program, which also resulted in our property tax program, which was extended to families and children.
Thank you, Mayor Hancock. Dr. Calderon.
Okay. So you can't rely on the same people who are largely being funded by developers to fix the problem of gentrification. Gentrification is not an accident, and we don't need saviors coming into our neighborhoods to try to fix that. It is an intentional process. I would challenge all of you to read the book, How to Kill a City. It's a recipe for how Denver got to where it is. So initially, there is a symbiotic relationship between city officials and corporate interests who then take over our neighborhoods. So we need aggressive anti-displacement plans to keep people in their homes, to provide affordability, and to center the people who are most marginalized and at risk of displacement from leaving our city.
Thank you. Senator Tate.
When I worked for Mayor Pena, what we found is that the way to build a great city is to make sure you incorporate the people and the neighborhoods in the process, because they have the greatest stake in how the city looks, how it feels, and how it develops. That's been lost over the last 8 years with this administration. I'll begin by changing how we plan, how we direct, how we guide, and how we design growth by including all of you in the process. And when we do that, we will have to incorporate and encourage affordable housing throughout this city. And Lisa's right. You are not going to get a different result if the interests that have brought us where we are, where development is being done to us and not with and for us, are the ones who are funding the candidates who will be the next mayor.
Thank you very much. That's 3 down. Few to go. Mayor Hancock, we'll start with you on this one. Number 4, one of, if not the most polluted zip codes in America, 80216 is right here in Denver, Globeville, Elyria, Swansea. It is, unfortunately, no coincidence that this community is predominantly low income and people of color. Around the nation, we frequently see major polluters' operations be located or placed in low-income communities, which in turn leads to disparate negative health impacts on these communities, including heart and lung problems. What specific efforts will you lead to create equity and increase the quality of life in these neighborhoods?
I started my career working in the Globeville area, Swansea areas, following the ASARCO contamination. And it was about developing strategies and with the neighbors and ASARCO to begin the wholesale cleanup of the area. If you drive through the area today, many of us who grew up in this area, we also remember smelling the Purina plant. Because of my administration's leaning in, you no longer smell the Purina plant going in there, and you don't smell Safeway's bread, although I used to enjoy that. But primarily because we instituted more stringent, more restrictive filtering systems that protected the residents in the area. We're going to continue to do that because it's important that not only we engage the residents, but we also understand what environmental hazards are occurring. Unfortunately, in the 1950s, this is what happened to low-income neighborhoods. These type of warehouses or operations occurred, as well as the electrical lines that put us all in an environmental injustice position.
Thank you. Dr. Calderon.
Yes, this might be news to Mayor Hancock, but you can still smell the Purina plant. I live in that neighborhood. I'm also a cyclist on the Platte River, and you can also smell Suncor. So those problems are not cleaned up. If anything, they've been made worse because they've been forgotten about. As co-chair of the Colorado Latino Forum, we sued CDOT with our partners in GES Coalition and other community partners because our city leadership failed to protect us and are still failing to protect us. We were able to get a $600,000 settlement, not nearly enough, but it was at least for improved monitoring, hotline, and tree planting, and other things that our local leadership failed. So we take action.
Thank you. Senator Tate.
The first act of environmental racism and environmental injustice was the original installation of I-70 through Globeville, Swansea, and Elyria. Now it's insult to injury. We're digging a ditch through the same communities and expanding the same highway that never should have been there. As a state senator, as a state representative, I oppose this alignment. I tried to take it north over 270, lost the fight. So we've got to deal with it. But what I will do as mayor is, number one, make sure these neighborhoods are protected. But number two, there are a wealth of other services and investments that need to be made in these neighborhoods and others that are being neglected because we're putting city dollars in more affluent communities.
Thank you. Ms. Giellis.
Not only do we need to attempt to stop the I-70 project and address that issue head on, we need to look at the potential EPA delisting of this area and address that too. The cleanup is not done, and that's a starting point. We need to make a commitment to make it right with that neighborhood. And as others have mentioned, we need to make intentional investment in that area. Neighborhoods that have left behind, and it is very clear who those neighborhoods are, require that we make it right. Racism and injustice has been institutionalized in our planning system, and we have yet to realize and directly go to those communities, meet them where they are, and address the needs that those communities have to thrive in this growing economy.
Thank you very much. That's the end of that question. Give them a round, please. Question 5, we'll start back here again with Dr. Calderon. Cities and towns across Colorado have assumed a new mantle of leadership over the past year, establishing bold commitments to move away from dirty fossil fuels and repower their communities with 100% clean, renewable energy. During this time of federal inaction, Denver and national leaders like Atlanta and Salt Lake City have taken the bold step of committing to 100% clean energy. Developing clean energy sources like wind and solar translate directly to job creation, a reliable and resilient energy supply, low energy costs, improved public health, and a better environment. What specific clean energy initiatives and incentives will you support that will expand investment and deployment of renewable energy projects and move Denver toward a 100% clean energy economy by 2030?
Well, for one, I do support SB 181. I also support the Green New Deal and would look at adopting it on the local level in Denver. And what that essentially means is that it's not only about fast tracking a carbon-free environment or city in Denver, it's also about equity and re-looking at how our resources are allocated. So if we look at guaranteed green jobs, we're looking at folks who are needing the work, who have been left out of the prosperity of Denver, and that we can bring into the new green economy. We can also look at creating eco-districts where they're doing in other parts of the nation and in the world. We are just behind, so I would fast track that.
Thank you very much. Senator Tate.
The trend toward renewable energy is inevitable, and it is clear it is here. We need to accelerate it for the sake of the planet because we don't get a do-over. This is it. I also support the Green New Deal. The Blue-Green Initiative between labor and the environmental community is key because as we transition from the fossil fuel economy, we need a just and equitable transition for these workers. We also need to look at ways of employing people who historically have been underutilized as we move into this environment. Facilitating and accelerating the use of solar panels on properties, expediting the use of other energy efficient methods in construction is also required.
Thanks very much. Ms. Giellis.
Well, Denver is already beginning to fall short of their major target to reduce emissions just in this first few years. So we have a lot of work to do to catch up and truly get ahead. Lisa mentioned the Eco District. The River North Art District under my leadership became one of the country's first eco districts, and we have led the way in trying to push for more sustainable development, including looking at things like not only how private development is built, but how the public invests in public infrastructure. Where the Brighton Boulevard was the first street in the city to be built with the ultra-urban green standards, meaning we treat the stormwater before it runs off. That sort of innovation is not just needed at the neighborhood level, it's needed at the citywide level. Every investment the city makes needs to contribute to our sustainable future, and we need to use policy to push the private sector to do the same.
Thank you. Mayor Hancock.
Again, we're talking about things that you want to do. The reality is Denver is doing it. You realize Denver signed an MOU with the largest utility in the country with Excel to accelerate the implementation of renewable sources of energy and to expand it to every changing the way we do business and using these new sources is well underway, and thanks to our partnership with Excel to get it done.
Thanks very much. Give me a hand for the end of that question round. Number 6. Consistently, politicians who are both anti-environment and anti-worker have cynically worked to put the needs of working people against the needs of our planet in order to undermine both and maximize fossil fuel profits. In reality, these needs are fundamentally linked, and the move to a clean energy economy should both better the lives of workers across the nation, as well as improve the quality of our air, water, and land in ways that benefit everybody. We'll start with Senator Tate. Do you support the transition to clean energy economy, and how will you ensure that this transition does not leave large portions of the population, including workers, behind?
Yes, and in addition to everything I've said before, as I indicated, the Blue-Green Alliance is key here because it's collaborations like that that work against the interests you described, where labor and the environmental community are coming together and seeing how they have interests that are aligned and they move together collectively. We need to reach into communities like Globeville, Swansea, Elyria, Sunnyside, and others where people have historically been underutilized and underemployed and train them for these new jobs in this new renewable economy, energy economy that is coming. We've got apprenticeship programs that exist in a number of the labor unions. We have apprenticeship programs that exist in a number of private industries. We've got to get people prepared and partner with DPS for the transition.
Thank you. Ms. Giellis.
We have the opportunity here to innovate and to create a whole new economy based around the environment. People outside of Denver see Denver as a leader in sustainability, but are surprised to learn some of the facts. In reality, there's a real opportunity at this moment. Earlier this week, the New York Times printed an article about how more cities are being forced to put recycling into the trash because China is no longer accepting some of our recycled materials. Other cities, like Salt Lake City, are building plants to convert their plastics into fuel. They're creating a local economy, building facilities, and creating jobs around a sustainable future and environment. That's an opportunity we have to not only change the paradigm of how cities deal with climate, but to provide new jobs and new opportunities.
Thanks very much. Mayor Hancock.
This transition in the economy is absolutely critical, and we're at a critical point. And that's why my administration and our workforce office has already partnered with major developers around solar energy and wind. We are training people right now from underserved neighborhoods to transition into the new economy. From the fossil fuel, from construction, people are getting those opportunities right now. We have put in partnership with city council members, and we got to give them some partnership because they have stepped to the plate big time, and make sure that we have solid apprenticeship programs in every effort that we have undergone in the city of Denver. But this is also evidence of the city of Denver from day one in July 2011 saying sustainability will be woven around every issue that we try to address in the city of Denver: economy, community, and environment.
Thank you. Dr. Calderon.
We must dispel the false notion between jobs and the environment and stop pitting vulnerable communities and workers against each other. We can do both in terms of taking care of the environment and having good jobs. But I also want to point out another subgroup of that population when it comes to the green economy, and that's women. Women tend to be most at risk and most vulnerable. We tend not to be the decision makers at the highest levels. One of the reasons I'm running to be the first woman mayor of Denver. And so to have a gender responsive policy where we center the experience of women, that we get them trained. When I ran the city's reentry program, that was one of the things that I did is having people who are otherwise shut out of jobs to get training and join into the green economy. Thank you.
Thanks very much. We'll start the next question with Ms. Giellis. The population of the Denver metro area is expected to double by 2050. With the increased population, water needs will also double in the absence of innovative approaches to water conservation. Water resources are already stressed and are already trending toward reduced availability due to warmer climate trends. What specific efforts will you lead to increase water conservation and efficiencies in Denver?
Thank you. The first thing starts by acknowledging that if we are going to be growing, again, looking at our growth plans, what can we accommodate? We right now, the way we adopt site-specific rezoning plans does not require us to look at water usage, at impacts on utilities, at whether or not we can accommodate that now, how we are going to accommodate that now. That's where this starts. Can we actually accommodate the growth we have with the water resources we have? How do we ensure we have clean water? How are we treating water? How are we treating our water runoff? We are going to have to form a coalition with the regional governments, with our partners to ensure that we can sustain this projected growth. It's coming and we have to deal with it. Can we deal with it and how will we deal with it smartly?
Thank you very much. Mayor Hancock.
You know, the city of Denver is at 1970 levels of water use, even in the midst of our unprecedented growth. Our community has become much smarter and much more efficient in using of water. But with our growth and with the challenges along the Colorado River Basin, we do have to get smarter with regards and more efficient as we go forward. And so it is about density and not sprawl. It is about using or being innovative with non-potable water. It is about extending the Purple Pipe network throughout Denver. These are the things that we're doing with great projects like the National Western. I promise you, I want to tell you that it will be the first net zero campus of its size in Colorado. And I'm excited about it, and water and how we conserve water is one of the top priorities for that campus.
Thank you very much. Dr. Calderon.
So we can conserve water, but if we are polluting it, that's not helping either. If we're not enforcing regulations, that's not helping it either. If we turn a blind eye to the abuses that are happening by corporations, that's not helping either. And so all of those things are occurring right now in some of our neighborhoods that are less protected. So we need to enforce our compliance. We need to make sure that we are also being responsive to water usage. Water, clean air and water should not be based on the zip code in which you live. It should be a right. And we should have leadership that is out there looking out for us rather than taking subsidies to help reelect them, rather than listening directly to the people.
Thank you very much. Senator Tate, last one.
I spent 12 years on the board of Denver Water, many of those years as president of the board, and many of the things that Michael described, Denver Water did, partly under my leadership and with my colleagues. We were the ones who put out the Use Only What You Need program, but you, the people in this room, responded to that message, changed how you live, and reduced your consumption both in your homes and in irrigation. That educational effort, that ethic of conservation needs to continue. But we've got to go beyond that. Denver Water struck historic deals with the entire West Slope, with Aurora, and even with Douglas County to get those communities to conserve. We've got to continue to do this, not just on a regional basis, but on a statewide basis, and it's going to happen in a Western states basis too.
Thanks very much. That's question 7. Let's give him a round. Start this one with Mayor Hancock. Denver's current waste diversion, recycling, and composting is at an abysmal rate of 21% as compared to the national average, which is also terrible, of 34%. The current goal for the city of Denver is to meet the national average by 2020. Do you support pay-as-you-throw or other innovative solutions to this problem, and how will you address equity issues associated?
Appreciate it. Yes, I do support it, and let me just tell you, it's now 22% in Denver. We increased recycling by 50% since I've been mayor. And what we've been doing behind the scenes is working internally to disentangle and to set up the process so that we can move to a pay-as-you-throw. Right now it's an inverted pyramid. We're disincentivizing people to actually compost and recycle. And we absolutely understand that. But we needed to make sure we had the right bins and we had the right trucks so that we can traverse the city and bring forward the pay-as-you-throw system. Within a year, we'll be moving toward the pay-as-you-throw because administratively we had to set up so we can serve all the houses. I do support making sure we can take care of those who can't pay whatever nominal fee there will be, as we have done with some other elements within the city.
Thank you. Dr. Calderon.
And even 22% is still an abysmal rate, even if that's an increase. So what we need to do is reduce barriers. You know, even if everybody composted, for example, we don't have the technology to handle all of that. So this city has not invested in infrastructure, and we need to prioritize that to handle what we're asking people to do. Over 80% of Denverites agree that it's a good idea to compost and recycle, and yet we have such a low rate, and a lot of that is because it's geared towards single-family dwellers. So that leaves out a lot of folks in apartment buildings. And so if we're going to talk about equity and talk about charging people, then yes, we can have a pay-as-you-throw with a compost offset, recycling offset, but you have to have a concrete plan first.
Thank you. Senator Tate.
Well, at 22%, we have a lot of room for improvement. And part of what we have to do is begin, it's an educational effort, folks. I've learned through the course of this campaign that nearly 80% of what we throw outside is compostable or recyclable. But the vast majority of people don't know that. In my Park Hill neighborhood, when we're dragging our bins out in the street once a week, people are kind of looking around trying to figure out where to put things. We need to help people and educate them. Then we can boost recycling, we can boost composting, but we need to change the price signals. We need to make composting and recycling free and look at charging for trash collection. We need to have different size bins. We need to invest in the processing infrastructure, and education is the key. People will do the right thing if they know what to do.
Thank you. Ms. Giellis.
Yes, I support pay-as-you-throw, and I agree. We have to flip this. We have to look at paying for trash and free compost and recycling. Apartment buildings are an issue. Also, commercial uses. How are we working with our commercial industry to improve their rates of recycling and composting? which is a big piece of the puzzle. And right now it's all privatized. So we have to figure out how to work with those companies to do that. In addition to composting, there's a lot to look at in relation to food, how we're using food, how we're managing the food supply, and how we can look at that from a sustainable future as well, how we are looking at it from an equity lens as well. So there's a lot we can do on that angle, and it also leads back to this idea of innovation and what kind of economy can we build locally to support these changes and trends for the long term for Denver.
Thanks very much. We'll start the next question with Dr. Calderon. Over $8 trillion have been divested from fossil fuels globally. In 2017, Denver issued a proclamation reaffirming our city's commitment to planet-friendly policies, yet the city of Denver has not yet divested. Would you support Denver's divestment from any holdings in lending institutions or companies engaged in the ownership, financing, extraction, production, refining, processing, distribution, and/or direct sales of fossil fuels?
Yes, the short answer. And I would also divest from accepting campaign contributions from the oil and gas industry. You can't have it both ways. You can't profit off of the same industry that you are saying that you are basically going to help move toward a carbon-free city. It doesn't work that way. So change starts today. We can't wait. As we heard opening comments, we have an urgency now. That means everything we can possibly do today, we must do. And whether that's divestment, whether that's giving back campaign contributions from the oil and gas industry, every little bit helps because it adds up, and we don't have time to waste.
Thanks very much. Senator Tate.
Where you put and spend your money speaks to your values. This conversation is not dissimilar to what we saw in the 70s and 80s when many communities were telling banks, if you invest in South Africa with their regime of apartheid, we just won't do business with you. And over time, as removing those investments occurred, banks began to divest and withdraw their investment in South Africa and supporting that regime. We can do the same thing here by divesting in banks and other organizations that invest in the fossil fuel economy. It's something we ought to do. We know the trend is inevitable anyway, so it's just smart to move our money now and get ahead of the curve, and it's the environmentally and the responsible and the correct thing to do.
Thanks very much. Ms. Giellis.
Yes, absolutely. And I also support the legislation to give more local control to communities. Ultimately, this is a quality of life issue to focus on clean energy, to protect our neighborhoods and our communities, protect their mineral rights, and ensure that we are protecting the future of this community for the long haul. So I absolutely support that. We need to do what we say and say what we do, and I'm committed to doing that.
Thanks very much. Mayor Hancock.
The answer is yes, and we already started the process. The city of Denver has a $5 billion investment portfolio. Less than 1% was invested in companies that may be doing business in fossil fuel. And they're coming to an end, and our goal is the next investments will be guided by businesses that align with our values around sustainability and around equity. And so we've already sent the clarion call. Our investment advisory group is already aligned and ready to go, and our CFO has already begun the process of implementing the policy as directed.
Thanks very much. We have one question left in the lightning round, and here it is. We'll start with Senator Tate. The Denver metro area has regularly failed to meet ozone standards set by the EPA since 2004. Ozone is a pollutant known to cause a wide variety of respiratory issues and illnesses. These effects have been found even in healthy people, but can be more serious in people with lung disease such as asthma. They may lead to increased school absences, medication use, visits to doctors and emergency rooms, and even hospital admissions. What measures will you take to ensure that Denver reaches attainment and has clean air for everyone?
You know, it goes back to a number of the issues we've already talked about in terms of transitioning people out of single occupancy trips and changing the way we travel around the city and the community. We need to accelerate our investment in every transit option available to us, and we need to do it now. There's no excuse for delaying. There's no excuse for waiting. We need to take advantage of technology. We need to take advantage of a host of other options, including the shuttles we talked about, including ride sharing, including incentivizing carpooling, all of that. We've got to get cars off the road as quickly as possible and transition to an electric fleet. And as mayor, I'll convert the entire city fleet to electric.
Thanks very much. Ms. Giellis?
Our air quality in the last few weeks has been as bad as it was, as worse than it was since 1983. So clearly this is an issue. Earlier this week, I was at a press conference with Diana DeGette, who is tackling Suncor and the emissions coming out of Suncor. And she's taking it on at a federal level. This slipped through loopholes at the state and at the local level. So at the federal level, they're tackling what emissions look like. Those are things we need to have our eyes directly on as the city. This is our community. These are our people breathing that air, and we have to fight for that. We need to be pushing from the ground up to make sure the state and feds are protecting us as well.
Thanks very much. Mayor Hancock?
Yes, you know, to address the ozone and, of course, also the air quality, we must also remember and recognize this is a regional opportunity. It makes no sense for Denver just to do what it's doing, and then all of a sudden we have winds blowing in from Commerce City where Suncor exists, or in northern Colorado where there's a lot of fracking and drilling taking place, which is also contributing to our brown cloud. So the reality is that, yes, we must do what we can in terms of our fleet conversion. And by the way, you cannot convert all of Denver's fleet because the technology does not exist for our patrol vehicles and our larger vehicles today. But we are working with CNG to convert. We've already converted those big vehicles on CNG, and we are waiting for the technology to come along for our patrol. But the reality is the plan we have in place today with regard to electrification, with regards to carbon emission reductions in the city of Denver, and our multimodal plan is what we have in store, which is helping us with the ozone.
Thanks very much. Dr. Calderon?
So as a college professor, I had the opportunity to teach in Beijing and for a summer, and I had to monitor the air quality before I would go out because I started developing lung problems within a short amount of time. I don't want that to be the reality for Denver. And it starts with how our cities are planned. The mayor has a legacy project of creating an aerotropolis down by the airport. And that is promoting sprawl. So when we promote sprawl, then we are also increasing carbon emissions. Rather than smart growth strategy, where we are returning to the village concept, where we're able to walk and bike and get everything we need within our local community. So I would put a focus back from building bigger and better buildings to returning to the neighborhood concept.
That's the lightning round. Let's give them all a big round of applause. A bunch of politicians stayed within the time limits. You think about that. The next section was going to be questions from Senate District 34 because Senator Gonzalez was going to be moderating. The questions are still from Senate District 34, but our moderator will be the program manager for the Alliance Center, Isabel Mendoza. Let's give her a hand. This round's a little bit different. We collected these questions during the registration process from constituents of Senate District 34. Ms. Mendoza will identify questions from the community by the submitter's name and neighborhood. So-and-so from Montbello wants to know X. Each answer will be 1 minute, so you have another 15 seconds for each answer in this round. And without further ado, Isabel Mendoza, thanks a lot.
Good evening, everybody. Such an honor to be here. Thank you so much for everybody for coming. The senator actually has the name and the locations of who submitted these questions, so I don't. I'm so sorry. But we're going to start this round with Ms. Giellis. Denver has been garnering a great deal of prosperity in the last few years, but that prosperity seems to be represented only in a few distinct neighborhoods in the city. How do you intend to address this inequitable share of the city's good fortune?
Great question. And again, it goes back to planning. It goes back to putting neighborhoods first and putting people first and looking at every neighborhood as an ecosystem to ensure that they have what they need to prosper and grow. And that means looking at the built environment. Do they have good access to transit? Do they have attainable housing across the spectrum? Do they have parks and open space that are accessible to them? Do they have grocery stores? Do they have things like rec centers and libraries that are open? One of the things, I've been traveling all over the city. I made a commitment to go to all 78 neighborhoods as part of this campaign, and I've been to well over half, and have found on weekends rec centers and libraries closed in our most challenged neighborhoods. That is not equity. Everybody deserves a fair shake. Everybody deserves to have access to the same opportunities, and looking at it at a neighborhood scale is where we start.
Thank you, Mayor Hancock.
Yeah, I think it's important to know rec centers are open on weekends. They may close at 2 or 3, but when I became mayor, we had some libraries that were closed half the time. We got them back up full time all over the city, particularly in our low-income neighborhoods, and we got our rec centers back open operating. And we've got, instead of 700 kids going into rec programs, over 100,000 of our kids going to rec centers, swimming for free and walking to our rec centers for free. That's equity. But I agree with Jamie. Mobility is important. You want to know where poverty exists? Tell me where the least number of mobility options exist. Mobility is a signal where poverty exists in the city of Denver. We have to execute our programs and policies through an equity lens. We've got to understand that the market oftentimes drives where development occurs, but where we have opportunity to push opportunities in neighborhoods like we're doing in Montbello, like we're doing in Green Valley Ranch, like we're doing in Gloveville, we can create a balance. It doesn't have to be either or, but it does take leadership to say there can be a balance, we can protect residents, and we can bring the amenities they deserve.
Thank you, Dr. Calderon.
So I have a little confession to make, and that is having a little bit of anxiety in thinking about this conversation with you all today. Because historically, people of color have been left out of the conversation in sustainability. But I had to then think back as someone who grew up in poverty, and my aunties are here, and was raised by a migrant farm worker. When you're poor, you recycle everything and reuse. We even reused and remade our toys. My grandmother would wrap up perishable food and put it in her pocketbook and bring it back home and then wash the handkerchief. That's recycling. My daughter's Navajo grandmother, who taught her the beauty way prayer, beauty in front of you, below you, behind you, all around you. That's part of loving the environment and taking care of the environment. So we need to bring more of those folks into this conversation. I love that we're having this conversation at the Sustainability Center, but unfortunately it's not very diverse, and so I would challenge all of you to bring folks of color and those impacted communities into the conversation.
Thank you very much, Senator Tate.
I couldn't more fundamentally disagree with some of the things that have been said about how you deal with the lack of equity in investment in this community. The approach I will take as your mayor is what I learned from one of my mentors, Mayor Pena. Rather than start putting a plan together, I'll come out into the neighborhood and ask you, what do you have, what do you want, what do you need, and how do we bring it to the community? Instead of letting the market and developers tell me where they want to develop in our community and what they want to give us, we'll turn this conversation around and say, these are the things we need in our different communities. This is what people want. This is what they're willing to support. We need you to build it, or you need to build somewhere else. It's appropriate to have those conversations. It's our city, it's your city. We ought to get what we want out of that. And we ought to tell folks, if you want to invest in this community, you have to invest in different parts of the community. You don't get to cherry pick.
Thank you. Next question. In the fall of 2017, Denver Artists for Rent Control concluded a letter writing campaign by hand delivering a collection of letters of concern to our mayor and governor. These letters represented a cross-section of concerns regarding attainable space for our community to thrive in, our community of arts and culture in particular, with emphasis on our housing crisis. Most of these letters were handwritten from the heart of the person writing them, and all were personally signed. We never got a reply. How will you make sure to directly answer constituents' concerns like ours as mayor?
Okay.
Yes.
I don't know about never getting a reply, because my entire administration moved in to work with the artists in the Rhino District and to have a conversation with them about one, the safety concerns in the facility that they were in following the Oakland fire that killed many people. And so we were greatly concerned, and upon inspection found that we had a lot of similar challenges within that facility. But let me say to you, I support absolutely affordable housing for accessibility for all people. If people want to live in a city, we ought to have the audacity to work to supply it. I've been proud today, right now we have over almost 1,200 housing units under construction, another 1,000 that are coming through the pipeline. We will be under construction by the end of this year. Today, Councilman Alvis Brooks and I broke ground for 2 of them, one in the Rhino District and the other in the Globeville area, Swansea communities. The city of Denver directly drove those projects. And guess what? They're coveted for affordability for the next 198 years. This is the kind of projects and efforts that we're undergoing. But I also just spoke with an artist, and we talked about housing. And he sat there and told me, he said, sir, we do need more housing, and we're focused on what's housing in the Rhino area right now for our artists.
Thank you very much. Dr. Calderon, please.
So I was one of the original protesters, along with Julie Gonzalez, before she was a senator, of the Ink Coffee protests. And we were, of course, upset not just about the sign, but the rapid gentrification pushing out the displacement. So I'm glad Mayor Hancock is taking credit for looking at affordable housing units because his policies have also accelerated gentrification. And so we do need to repair the harm that was done by pushing out low-income folks, working families who are struggling from that community. So I think rather than relying on your staff to respond, get out with the people. When you are requested, when they are in crisis, when they are saying we are hurting, when they are saying we are dying in the streets, and you can't be bothered to come yourself to talk directly to the people, that's when we need and why we need a leadership change.
Thank you. Senator Tate.
One of the reasons we're here having these conversations is because the policies of the last 8 years haven't worked. One of the things that we need to acknowledge, and we need to thank the senator, she's not here, I believe she's carrying a bill that will allow municipalities to enact their own rent control ordinances to get by the Colorado constitutional restriction on rent control. I carried a similar measure in 2000, got it out of the Senate, couldn't get it out of the House. But that's what we need, are additional innovative tools, because if you want to stop the turn and the flow of gentrification and displacement, housing is the key. We need affordable housing built throughout this community, both for sale and for rent, and this rent control statute may be a way to address that. I also agree that we ought to address the needs of the artists who have a specific concern, and they deserve an answer. The reality is this: I'm not an artist. It's not what I do. But what I do acknowledge is that the arts and our artists reflect the soul of our community, and we need to support what they do.
Thank you. Ms. Giellis.
On December 15th, 2016, I was one of the first calls when 25 people were pushed out on a snowy, freezing cold evening from Rhinoceropolis after a surprise eviction. And in the 3 weeks that followed, 6 more calls like that, sometimes in the middle of the night, from artists getting pushed out. We pushed the city, I pushed the city, the head of the planning department, fire, and police to answer why urgent evictions. And all that happened was a book was opened from the building code, and I got pointed to a code line that said why this had to happen. It wasn't about getting to yes and having compassion for people that were getting pushed out one after another, or saying, let's find a solution to stop this, to keep them in place. It was about all the reasons why we couldn't. And that fight has continued on for 2.5 years. We're still waiting for art space affordable housing to get developed. We're still waiting for some of these spaces to be cleared, to reopen. A lot of them were closed. It starts with getting to yes and having compassion and care to solve these problems, not just tell us why they don't work.
Thank you. This next question will start with Dr. Calderon. The 2030 Mobility Action Plan sets a goal of tripling transit commute share from 5% to 15% by 2030. Would you achieve this by tripling transit service or by some other means? How would you promote affordable, sustainable public transit in Denver?
Yes, so through a smart growth strategy that actually is the core of that, in that people need to be able to have transit options. I understand when people get a little reactionary when we talk about taking away cars or being less car reliant. And that's not necessarily because they want to stay in their cars. It's because they don't have other options. I used to live in Montbello, for example. And so imagine having groceries and kids and a stroller, and you don't have reliable transit options. So in order for that to be a reality is that we have to really scale up how we are doing transit. And again, moving to this village concept where things are, everything that we need are essentially within our neighborhood. And we're moving away from that the more that we focus on building. And by the way, sprawl isn't just building out, it's also building up, because fundamentally it's about disconnectedness. So our transit system should focus on connection, just like they have in other cities where you can get from one stop to another and not have to go very far distances to get what you need.
Thank you, Senator Tate.
The answer isn't only transit, it's how we plan and develop and design our city. I live in Park Hill, and there was a time where there was no bank in Northeast Denver, north of Colfax and east of York Street. You had to go downtown or you had to go someplace else just to bank. We still have food deserts. We still have neighborhoods with no grocery stores or viable options. So people in those communities, and typically they're lower income communities, and so we're putting an additional burden on them. They have to drive and travel to get somewhere. So how we design and being intentional about design is part of the answer to the question. But in addition, some of the other transit options we talked about before have to be on the table for various communities. And finally, what we haven't talked about, what we ought to concede is that we do have RTD. And whatever we do and what I'll do as mayor has to dovetail with that system. I know they focus on a regional level and they invest a lot in other communities, but we need to maximize whatever infrastructure is there to make what we do in Denver more efficient and effective for our people.
Thank you, Ms. Giellis.
There's two things: how we're going to build the transit and how we're going to make the transit more usable. So the mayor talked about a Department of Transportation proposal that's coming forth. The big question we still have to answer is funding transit and how we're going to get it built and how we're going to do that fast. That has to be a priority. Denver is a city that was built on a streetcar network. It was built to connect our neighborhoods, and that needs to be the focus. That's the only way we move commuter usership of transit, which has only increased 1% in 15 years. We truly move the needle, is by connecting everything. In terms of how we get people to use it more, it has to be affordable. One thing we're proposing, for example, is that we need to allow free ridership on our transit network currently and in the future to kids 18 and under. There is no transit to get to places like rec centers. So even though we have the great My Denver card, people can't get there to use it. We have to look at pricing, usage, and how the network gets built out and how quickly we can get it built out.
Thank you, Mayor Hancock.
I'm going to take the first 15 seconds to correct something. Since I've been mayor, I'm the first mayor in Denver's history to quarterly take its entire cabinet to every corner of the city, every corner of the city. And so when you come talk about accessibility and making sure residents get to you, I take my entire cabinet, chief of police, fire, planning director, everyone goes out, and we stay in the community for a morning every quarter in this every year. And so I'm proud of the fact that my cabinet has been community focused and accessible to the community. With regards to this issue, in 2016, I announced a mobility action plan and committed $2 billion. And I drew a line on the Elevate Denver bond when we sat down with all the groups, culturals, everyone, before they started asking for money. I said, I'm drawing a line, half of this bond is going toward mobility. We're going to expand our sidewalk network, we're going to invest in transit, and we're also going to invest in multimodal bike lanes throughout the city of Denver. And we're doing that. And let me close by saying this. We went to RTD recently and helped negotiate lower fares because we started with the idea that every kid had a My Denver card. We wanted them to have free access to the buses and transit system. We still hope to accomplish that very soon.
Thank you very much. This next question, Senator Tate, you will be the first one to answer. Excel Energy committing to 100% renewable by 2050, and Jared Polis pledging Colorado to renewable by 2040 are great bits of news. But what are you going to do to hold them accountable to those commitments? What are you going to do to be sure there are no barriers in the way of these commitments?
I think I start with the belief that those commitments, while laudable, are probably not aggressive enough. 2050 and 2040 seem a very, very long way away. And based on the conversation we've had tonight, we need to accelerate that process and try to get there by 2030. I will commit to work with both Excel and the governor and others to look at where the city can leverage and weigh in to help us meet the commitment. I've already indicated as mayor, I'll work to move the city's load to renewable by 2030, consistent with the Green New Deal, and will welcome anything Excel and the governor have in mind and the legislature has in mind to do that also. Going on to one other point that was mentioned, this move has to be regional in addition to just a city initiative and effort. And so working with other local communities where we collaborate in many parts of our city, when you drive, you don't know when you're in Denver or when you've crossed the line to another community. And some of the infrastructure is laid out that way. So I'll also work across lines with other metro mayors.
Thank you, Ms. Giellis.
Accountability starts at home. So we have to start with us and making sure we are also committed to being more aggressive in those goals. Setting goals for 2040 and 2050 that are well beyond any time limits that our leaders will be in office is wild, because it's one thing to say, it's another to do it. We've already seen our sustainability goals pushed back by 10 years for Denver. So it starts with us. And I do agree on the regional collaboration. I believe as a region, especially as a growing region, that we have the voice and the power that we need to hold our state accountable and hold each other accountable to meeting all those goals as a whole.
Mayor Hancock.
I think there's a reason why Excel, I know there's a reason why Excel came here to make such a bold statement announcement. Because they knew locally here with me, they had a partner who had been working with them for years to address these issues, and they aligned with the same values. And we had already made those bold statements and commitments toward 80 by 50 and our renewable electricity by 2030. Absolutely. If we can meet those goals, if we can accelerate and create opportunities, we will do it. Let me share something with you. When I became mayor in 2011, we had a great partner in Washington in President Barack Obama. He understood the dire consequences. He understood the sense of urgency. Today, we have a bumbling idiot in Washington, D.C., who doesn't understand science. And I don't know what he understands. I don't know if he understands anything. But the reality is we need the federal government, we need the state government all to lean in. And I'm excited about having Governor Polis in the office because he gets it. And he's not beholden to anyone, and he's leaning in, and he says, we're going to make these goals, we're going to reach them. So if we can accelerate and make them, we're going to do it, but we're going to do it without playing games and wordsmithing and promise you the pie in the sky. We got work to do on all sectors, and only by working together will we accomplish them.
Thank you. Dr. Calderon.
So starting at home means that we have to fully fund our initiatives, and that includes our Office of Sustainability, which is not fully funded, which needs to be scaled up. Denver is great at making wonderful plans. It seems like they're rolling out a plan every week, especially during election season. So we've got plenty of plans, but what we need to do is to have results. And I agree with folks who are talking about the regional approach. Mainly because in talking to some of the other municipal officials, is that they have said that Denver has not been a very good partner. And in fact, that they've had to read about things that Denver is doing rather than having direct communications from our city leadership. You know, our pollution, our affordable housing issues, they don't stop at a city border. And so what we need to do is to make sure that we are working collaboratively with our partners and also giving them the due respect to work on this issue together.
Thank you very much. That concludes this round of questioning. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you.
Let's give Isabel Mendoza another hand. Thank you so much. That was great. We got one more round left, the media round. Over here are your intrepid reporters from Denver. Any one of them can ask one question to all of the candidates sitting up here right now. Any takers? Hey, Andy from Streets Blog. Let's give Andy Bussian a hand, yeah?
Hey there. So this morning I read in the Denver Post that Senator Tate would like to freeze all construction permits. until after the election. Let's see. Ms. Giellis would like to limit all zoning changes, and both Dr. Calderon and Ms. Giellis would like to put a hold on the adoption of the Denverite planning process, which has been going on for 3 years. So when I read that this morning, it made me think of Neil Gorsuch and how during 2016, the Republican-controlled Senate prevented the Obama administration from having a Supreme Court nominee. And I'm curious, for the three of you, is this just political posturing, or is this something that you sincerely believe? And if you do believe this, do you intend to stop making important decisions at some point in your term? Would it be maybe any election year, 6 months before an election? What would be the time frame when you think that you would want to stop making important decisions?
Thanks very much for the question. I forgot to mention this is a 1-minute answer round, and I think we started with Senator Tate last time, so Ms. Giellis, it's yours.
So I was the first candidate to call for a pause to the Denverite plan, and I want to emphasize pause because it is a plan that is 1,634 pages long with 500 recommendations in it. 500 shoulds and coulds and woulds recommendations, not clear black and white, not prioritization. Out and about in the community, very few people know the comprehensive plan process is going on, and even those that do are unclear about its intentions, what it clearly is setting out to do. And part of the concern people have is that it is opening up the city for development all over before we have a chance to invest in infrastructure around transit, before we clearly understand the sustainability impacts of that. Sustainability doesn't even lead in the plan, and truthfully, it should. That's why we've called for a pause. The conversation on rezonings that was in the Post today was a proposed conversation about the concern we have over how zoning will be dealt with in the future. It's an idea, it's a conversation, but what we're trying to do is make sure we get the next 20 years right.
Would you want to serve your full term? When would be the point when you think that it would be appropriate to stop making important decisions?
We're not asking to stop making important decisions. We're saying what we've heard out there is that there's lack of clarity over what this does for the next 20 years. You are just under 7 weeks away from potentially electing a lot of new leadership who still doesn't understand what the implications are. So we're asking for clarifications, for clarity on the proposed outcomes and what the clear vision and goal is, and making sure that it is truly inclusive. I mean, one of the things that it very much leaves out is the sustainability, environment, impacts on water, very key issues. And so we have to make sure we get this right. We can't mess up the next 20 years. The next 20 years cannot solely be led by growth and development. It has to be thoughtful, it has to be sustainable, and it has to be focused on quality of life.
Thanks very much. Mayor Hancock, I suppose if you'd like to take this opportunity and talk about the Denverite plan. All right, great. Dr. Calderon.
We're not going in order?
He sort of passed it to you.
Okay. You know, it's not about not making important decisions. So I'm curious about the way that you've phrased the question. I think it's about we've been here before. And before, you may recall that 4 years ago, when the outgoing city council were pushing through the decisions around the I-70 expansion, and people were calling for a pause on that at that time too, because the new leadership who was going to come in were going to have to manage all of those issues. There were a great number of concerns as well. So it's not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. It's saying, what is in here, what is missing, and in fact that if sustainability is not actually a core focus, why are we pushing something through? On the other hand, we also need to honor the people who have participated in that process and make sure that that is maintained. And also just a correction around the cabinet and the community meetings. Those are actually not that accessible when you don't have an opportunity to ask questions, even though that they're held in the city, but the platform is already predetermined. So more accessibility with that.
Thanks very much. Senator Tate.
I disagree with how you characterize what I put forward. And I did call for not just deferring the decision on Denver Right, but not moving forward on major permitting, zoning, and other project decisions until after the new officers are installed after the elections this cycle. The difference is with President Obama, he was exercising his constitutional right and obligation to nominate justices to the U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. Senate was refusing to advise and consent and go through the process of considering his nominees. I'm not telling anyone they can't do something that they're legally authorized to do. I'm amplifying the concerns I've heard in the community. The community is concerned. Part of the conversation we're having tonight is what's happened to our community over the last 8 years with gentrification, displacement, the failure to honor sustainability goals, and to make this a more livable, accessible community. We're simply saying if you haven't done it for 8 years, let's wait another 70 days till some new people get in office.
Thanks very much.
Can I respond to some of that? I think it'd be fun. No, I was asked to answer the question. You didn't ask me the question. May I rebut? So here's the reality. I don't think you mischaracterize it all. I've been sitting in these forums and they said, wait a minute, stop, come on, let's be courteous. 25,000 people, Denver residents, leaned in on this plan. You smacking them in the face when you say your opinion doesn't matter, we should stop it. And you're absolutely right. Just to educate folks, in 2002, we passed the current comp plans. That council didn't pass. We're about to have the largest turnover in city government's history. They passed the plan. 80% of all development today has fallen under that plan. 2010, I'm on council. We rezoned the whole city. We could have passed it the other council. It was encouraged. We didn't do it. So as they've called for a reset, this council, this administration is going to finish the job we've been asked to do. And then finally, when you say reset, moratorium, I want you to know we've had one. It's called the Great Recession. And we had architectural firms close, engineering firms close, we had housing developers close, our builders close. What are you going to tell those workers when they're those construction workers when you're told we're not going to do any more development or construction in the city? Go home. We've had it. It's called the Great Recession.
Thank you very much. Our next and last question from the media is going to be from Andy from the Denver Post.
I better make it a good one. How many miles of Denver's roads, how many parking spots should the city rededicate for non-automobile purposes? Green space, bikes, and which ones would you start with?
Should I go first?
I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
We are preparing to move forward with a strategy that creates free parking for high efficiency and electric vehicles in downtown Denver. And we are currently going through the process of determining how many per street going forward. You still have the challenge of making sure that parking turns over and retail continues to thrive where there is metered parking in the area. That is a big deal for people who have invested in retail downtown Denver and where there's metered parking. Today at the airport, we have free parking for those, or we have, preference parking for electric vehicles in the airport. They're also going through the process right now. The other thing we have to look at is because we become more of an e-commerce, is we have to start thinking about the freight coming through our downtown. I met with them yesterday. They said they have more deliveries in downtown because, one, more people are living downtown, but because we become more of an e-commerce economy. And we have to have a conversation about how we begin to accommodate what's happening in that industry as well.
Thanks very much. Dr. Calderon?
How about we start with the 10-lane highway expansion that's being proposed through the Global Elyria Swansea, highway that should never have been built in the first place. Oftentimes with highways being built through Black and brown communities and low-income communities. There have been other cities that actually move away from highways and turn it into green space and transit space and boulevards with multiple modes of transit. You know, Denver is stuck in the 80s with its highway expansion plans. It's just simply encouraging more car use rather than less. So getting into office, essentially, other cities have actually stopped highway plans, and it's not too late for us to do that and really listen to the community in those neighborhoods.
Thanks very much. Senator Tate.
I don't know how many parking spaces we convert, but I do know this. Denver has not built a major park of any size in over 10 years. We need to make an investment in green space in this community. And you don't make that investment by converting the Park Hill Golf Course into a mixed-use development. I'm sorry, but that just doesn't make sense. And that's what the city was proposing to do. If you've got that limited open space, you've got to make it available, you've got to convert it, you've got to use it. It doesn't help, and I understand the e-commerce, but there's something fundamentally wrong where without notice, when you try to park downtown, every time you use a card, the minimum parking fee is $1, even though you want to walk in and do something for 15 minutes. That doesn't make sense. So we need to relook at how we use the parking meters in that respect. The bottom line is this. It's our city, it's our community. We ought to dictate where and when we want green space, how we want it developed, and how we want to use it.
Thanks very much. Ms. Giellis.
Well, we have a little bit of a chicken and egg scenario here because as we've talked about, we are still building massive roadways and we are still prioritizing the car. If we want to change behavior, it goes back to the transit conversation. We have to build transit. We have to create opportunities for people to move on multimodal, complete streets and start building those before we can expect people to get out of their cars so we can convert the parking. So it is a chicken and egg. We need a full force, complete investment in multimodal streets. We need to look at streets like Broadway, which are major thoroughfares with retail up and down them, that could become truly wonderful, pedestrian-focused, cycle-focused, transit-focused streets. Not streets so people fly down, and my office is on South Broadway. I can't even get in my car parked on the street because cars are flying down at 50 miles an hour. It's unsafe. So that's where it starts. Complete streets, transit first. Then, Andy, we can turn all those parking spaces into green space.
Let's give a round of applause for the media questions. Thanks for folks for asking questions. We're at the end here, so we're going to give each candidate 2 minutes to do a closing statement, and we'll start with Dr. Calderon. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. Let's give our candidates a round of applause. This was not easy stuff. Dr. Calderon.
So you've heard the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And so that includes re-electing the same people who are not changing and being aggressive enough of where we need to go. It also isn't relying on the developer community to solve our problems. We need to be bold. We need to be brave. We need to, if we're going to change a paradigm, it starts now or it starts in less than 50 days. I think about 47 days in our new election. We need you to invest in change. And that includes funding our grassroots campaign. So if you want something different, you want us to speed to a green economy, you want to bring people in who have been left out of the conversation, it needs to be part of a social equity strategy and an environmental justice strategy. That's the framework we need to come from. And so I'm inviting those of you who actually want to make a green economy in Denver a reality to join me and join my campaign. Lisa Calderon, Lisa for Denver Mayor. I welcome you to join us in the fight and center the people rather than development in our future of Denver. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Penfield Tate.
Let me first thank all of you for attending and spending some time with us this evening. And let me thank the Alliance Center and the host for putting on this forum. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Just as we're at a critical point with our planet and the environment, we are at a critical point with regard to the future of our city. I'm asking for your support to be our next mayor to lead Denver's future. This city is out of balance. And people in every community I have traveled into have said that. They feel that development has been done to them and not with and for them. We talk about mobility. Oh, you can clap, thank you. We talk about mobility and other things, but part of the core problem is we haven't planned, we haven't designed, we haven't developed the city in a way where people can stay and live and work and shop and move in their communities. They're forced to move around the city because we've let developers tell us the city we get. They haven't had a mayor who's told them what we, the people of the city, want. I will be the mayor, I will be your advocate that tells those interests what we want and what we need in this city. We need leadership. I've exhibited leadership everywhere I've been, whether it's been in the legislature, whether it's been working with Mayor Pena, or whether it's been serving on Governor Romer's cabinet. I know how to get things done in this environment, and that's what we do because, folks, we got a lot of work to do to correct where we've been and how we got here, and we have to move quickly, but more importantly, we have to move collaboratively. You can't get bills passed in the legislature and the minority party if you can't work across aisle, if you can't meld different opinions and different perspectives together and move forward with a collective vision and a collective idea of how to bring change and improvement. This is a time of change. TateForDenver.com. I'd love to have your vote. I'd love to have your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Tate. Senator Penfield Tate. Ms. Jamie Giellis.
Denver, we are better than this. Are you guys ready to be bold? Are you ready to be bold? Because this is a moment to be bold. This is a pivotal moment in Denver's future. It truly is. We have grown at an exponential rate, but it has not benefited everybody. We need to create an environment where quality of life and innovation and ideas and boldness and big ideas and everybody at the table is our culture. Not development, not just money, not just growth for growth's sake. We can do so much better than this, but it takes vision and leadership and boldness and not being afraid to invest in the big ideas. I've been on the ground working in this community for 13 years, working in neighborhoods. I'm still working in neighborhoods, pushing the city to do better, pushing up from the ground up. And I've realized the only way you make change is being bold and going to the top. So we can make a difference. We have to put quality of life, community, the economic sustainability of this city first, and be a truly inclusive city overseen by ethical and accountable leadership. That's what's a priority. And I'm ready to do that. I want your vote on May 7th. I want it because I'm passionate, because I'm committed, because I've spent a career working on cities and urban growth in Denver, around the world, and I'm not afraid to invest in the big ideas. I want your support, and I hope on May 7th, when you check that box, you'll remember that this is a decision you're making not just for tomorrow, for the next 20 years. My campaign chair, Dennis Gallagher, always reminds me of an Athenian oath that says, leave your city more beautiful than you found it. That's what I want to do. Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie. Mayor Hancock.
I want to thank the Alliance and all their partners for putting this on, and let me thank all of you for being here as well. It has been through our partnership that we were able to really carry through the strategy of sustainability be one of our guiding principles in the city. And we've got some bold goals. We've got some bold operations. Our Department of Public Health and Environment now houses the Sustainability Office with their sustainability operations, and together, jointly, we are moving forward to accomplish these plans. Here's the reality. 8 years ago, thank you, the people of Denver gave me the greatest honor of my life outside of becoming a father and marrying my wife, Mary Louise, to be the mayor of this city, which was a childhood dream. I love this city. I grew up here, and though it was a challenging upbringing, I fell in love with Denver and want to do everything I can in public service to advance this city. We are living in a great city. I don't want you to be misled to believe that this city is in crisis. We are not. We're a standard barrier model around the world for a lot of things, including our sustainability efforts, including our efforts for economic revitalization, job creation, mobility efforts that we're undergoing. Folks, we are being called all over the world to address these issues and to share our best practices. And let me just say something. We have built parks in the last 10 years. Central Park in Stapleton, Bluff Lake Park in Stapleton, Parkfield Park in far northeast Denver. We have built 80, 75, and 90-acre parks in the last 10 years. 2 of them came online and were built while I was mayor. I led the Parkfield Park development. But I want you to know you should be proud of the city that you helped build, proud of the economic revitalization you helped determine. We do have work to do. And I agree with one thing that's been said up here. We have to find a balance. We corrected it. That's why we don't need a moratorium. We don't want to stop. We can create a great city, address the issues of housing, mobility, and neighborhood sustainability while also continuing to thrive. I don't want to explain to construction workers why you can't work anymore. I don't want to explain to architects why I got to put you out of business. Our home builders, I got to put you out. Folks, we can keep this city moving forward. I'm Michael Hancock. I'll be honored to be your mayor for the next 4 years.
Thanks very much. Let's give all our candidates a hand. Mayor Hancock, Jamie Giellis, Senator Penfield, Tate, Dr. Lisa Calderon, thank you so much for being here tonight. It wouldn't be, wait, we're not quite done yet. Wouldn't be an Alliance Center party if I didn't have a bunch of facts for you folks. The election is May 7th. That is 47 days from now. A winner is declared only if one candidate actually earns 50% or more of the vote. Otherwise, it goes to a runoff. That runoff would be a contest between the top 2 vote getters, and it will occur on June 4th. We are super lucky in Colorado. We have universal mail ballots. Your ballots will be in the mail the week of April 15th, but you can also go vote in person and register up to and including Election Day at justvotecolorado.org is where you can find out where you need to go. Make sure your vote is received in the hands of the clerk or a drop box by 7 p.m. on May 7th. And please keep sustainability a key issue of this race and this city. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Let's give our candidates one more hand. I'm Ian Silveri. Thanks to the Alliance Center for doing this. Thanks for you being here.